Hey everyone, today on Feathers Off-Road, I mentioned before in another video I recently took an adventure bike riding clinic taught by legendary off-road rider Chris Birch. One of the lessons on the final day was doing wheelies on the big bikes. I had my KTM 890 Adventure R out there. We practiced this a little bit on the final day, but I wanted to try again here once I got home. This move is like 80% utility, 20% showing off. Doing the wheelie is the same motion for jumping obstacles, and it comes in really handy for log crossings, all of those kind of things. So really what Chris taught us that day was it's made up of two moves. The first is loading up the suspension, basically doing a standing jump on the bike. You're driving the whole compression of the bike down and giving it maximum traction. The second move is like a quick blast of power. You're revving the throttle just a little bit with the clutch in, and then kind of dumping the clutch as you give it a little jolt of power. So it's kind of a brrrap is how he explained it, brrrap. And then the wheelie comes by combining those two moves. So one move is, as you can see here, loading up the suspension, and the second move is at the very bottom of that compression, when the suspension is completely loaded as much as it can be, when you have maximum traction and the bike's starting to get light, hitting it with that quick blast of power, and then shifting your weight backwards to just drive the traction even more. After that, everything is really just practice. You got to practice the power blast on its own, the compression load on its own. You don't want to pop the wheelie and go sideways because you're not balanced correctly or something like that. But then practicing the moves together. And so it's this jump and brap, jump and brap right at the bottom. And you can see this these shots I took with the drone. I just had it sitting out there over the course of, I think this was about an hour. And you can see that as I go on and on, I was actually starting to get pretty decent, to the point where I could get the wheel up at least most every time. Some of them were a little more controlled than others, and fatigue definitely started to set in, but I got quite a few, decent ones during this session. I posted a small clip of this on Instagram and tagged Chris Birch in it, and he replied, and what a stud. He actually said, even in Instagram, hey, you should be bending your knees a little bit more. There's not enough load going down into the bike. So this was, it's been a couple weeks since I've taken the class, and just a stud, still giving me feedback, still giving me critique. So this was a really fun exercise to go do. Here I am kind of in the, right next to the highway on-ramp, but this ended up being the perfect area to go and practice. This kind of a long straightaway. I think my only complaint with this exact spot was there's a couple areas where it was super powdery, almost sand. So I think if I went here again, I would shift to the right, just barely, where you can see it hasn't been traveled quite as much. But yeah, I think when I go back and try this again, I'm going to work on two things. I'm going to work on knees bent a little bit more per Chris's instructions. And then one is, I don't think I'm shifting my weight back as much as he does in his videos. To me, I felt like, and he gave me this feedback when we were in class, felt like I'm trying to pull the bike up with my arms. And unfortunately, physics doesn't work that way. So, you really need to load up the compression on the suspension, hit that moment of power just before you reach the bottom, and then at the same time, shift your weight back. So the two reasons I need to work on those two things is, one, if I'm not bending my knees enough or bending my ankles enough, then I'm not loading the suspension up as much as I could be. So if you were to stand there and stand in place and try to jump without bending your ankles, try and see how high you can jump, and then go and do it again where you bend your ankles and your knees and go all the way down. You can do a much bigger jump by loading the compression and the suspension that much more. So I need to bend my knees more. And then the other, you can see from these, I'm not really shifting my weight backwards. I am in a sense because the bike is starting to wheelie and sending me backwards, but I'm almost still leaning forward. Like if you look at a couple of these, like there I was back a little bit, but there I wasn't really back. And you know, you can tell the wheelie doesn't come so much vertical as it just comes off the ground about a foot, and then I'm just hitting the acceleration and just kind of carrying that 1 foot off the ground for a long ways. So what I want to get more towards is a slow, taller wheelie and less of these like low 1 foot off the ground fast ones. Like that one was a little bit higher, but you know, if you watch, say maybe this one, you know, wheel barely comes up. But quite honestly, at this point, the fatigue was starting to kick in, and I think this was the last go around for me. Went down to the end and kind of came back, but super fun. And you know, if you haven't, I've mentioned this in one of my other videos, if you haven't bought Chris's videos, he has a dirt bike series and an adventure bike series, and they cover all this stuff. And of course it was much better seeing him in person and having the feedback live, but the videos are awesome. So I'm going to keep practicing, but until next time, enjoy the ride.